Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Suter, and I'm the CEO and founder of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and I'll be moderating the panel today. And today we're going to talk about optimizing IT operations with AIOps. And as far as ATARC goes, we've got about 25 working groups, and AIOps is our newest. So this is kind of an evolving technology area there that we want to further explore with our panel today. Before we begin, I want to encourage the audience to submit questions all along the way in the Q&A session. We are also going to do them throughout the panel and any other time. We are going to have a few polls. We ask that you participate. It's helpful in getting your CPE credits. It's part of our, I worry about getting in trouble with CIOs. I worry more about getting in trouble with the CPE people. So if I can bring the panelists on, we're going to do some quick introductions and we'll get right into the discussion. If the panelists can come online. Hey, I think we're getting everybody. Here we go. Oh, wow, we're in great shape. So I'll do some quick, I'll just introduce everybody quickly, and then each of the panelists are going to give us about 5 to 7 minutes of AIOps and how it's affecting their organization. So the first person I would like to introduce is Lieutenant Colonel Kristen Sailing, EN49 Acting Director, People Analytics, Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Army, and an ATARC veteran. How are you doing today, Kristen?
I'm doing great, Thomas. I'm really happy to be here. So,
great.
Just want me to go ahead and lead off?
Quick intro. Okay. No, we're going to go ahead and introduce everybody, and I'll have you lead off in a minute. We also have with us Robert Bonneau, Director of Software, Data Analytics, and Embedded Systems, Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering at Department of Defense. And how are you doing today, Robert?
Doing well, thanks. Looking forward to talking about this subject.
Fantastic. Did I get your last name right?
Yes.
Good. My mom's a French teacher, so it sounds kind of French. I bet she would get mad at me if I mispronounced it. So thank you for coming today. We also have Scott Bellevue. Is that how we say it?
Yeah, I was gonna say, keeping with the French connection.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
I usually go with Bellevue, but I think there's a few different we'll call it regional dialects of the Acadians.
Yeah, and Scott is the Acting Chief Data Officer, U.S. Patent and Trade Office. And we also have Will Stewart, Program Manager, AI Pilot at the National Artificial Intelligence Institute at the Department of Veteran Affairs. How are you doing this morning, Will? Good to see you. You're on mute. Good.
Doing well. Glad to be here. Look forward to participating.
Great. Well, I've only done about 200 webinars, and every once in a while I forget to hit the mute button too, so it can happen to the best of us. We also have Shakib Cravey, Chief Data Scientist, Office of Data Services at the great National Technical Information Services at the U.S. Department of Commerce. How are you doing, Shakib?
Bonjour, everyone. Very excited to be here. Thank you, ATARC and Dynatrace, for the invitation.
Yep, thank you for coming. And then last but certainly not least, we have Willie Hicks, Public Sector Chief Technical Officer at Dynatrace. Good afternoon, Willie.
Good afternoon, Tom, and to everyone on the panel. It's really great to be here with all of you.
Great. And Willie, where are you out of?
So I'm out of the DC area. I'm out of my home office right now in Maryland. I am slowly getting back to meeting customers in the office, but still working from home.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us today.
Yep.
And I'd like to thank Dynatrace. They've been a great team, and we've been working with them on DevOps and now AIOps from the beginning. Carolyn Ford, Willie Hicks, and Bob Dorsch, we've been working with him for years. So thanks again for helping us out here and coming up with the program with us. Let's start off with you, Colonel Sailing. Definitely interested to hear more about your story and how it's evolved.
Oh, shoot, where do we even start? I mean, when we started having some of these conversations, I was just taking over a little organization that was focused on human capital and big data. We were looking at becoming the largest enclave in the Army for housing, sorting, and providing to research all of the personnel data we had. And we actually collect data from a lot of the other services for analysis as well. Now we are instantiating a whole of Army people analytics capability where we're bringing in a number of different AI projects to detect insider threat, to do high-risk behavior analysis. We have a lesser risk project, but no less important project right now to determine likelihood of attrition for some of our key skill sets. And we have that prediction coming out at the individual level, and we're managing a whole host of other projects. But in this process, kind of getting back toward the topic of AIOps, as we build bigger and bigger models, I mean, a lot of these models take probably terabytes, 2 terabytes of compute power. We have to start figuring out better ways of detecting anomalies in the behavior of the models and the behavior of our IT systems. So we're really starting to incorporate more of that capability. The biggest part of that comes back within my wheelhouse. One of the other projects that I run for the Army is developing talent management strategy for the Army's data workforce. What kind of capabilities do we need to acquire, develop, employ, and retain in order to actually make all this technology that we're trying to develop and deploy operate effectively? So we have a really good partnership going on with our CIO's office and his digital transformation strategy with ECMA, the Enterprise Cloud Management Agency, and a whole host of other participants, Army Futures Command fielding their CREATE environment, the AI Integration Center up at Pittsburgh that we have, fielding their COIUS environment, which is yet another large-scale analytics platform. We just keep branching out into more and more projects and more Army agencies as the whole Army gets focused on becoming more data-driven. It's a pretty exciting time for us. So if I come across really proud of us, we've made a lot of advances over the last 3 years, and I'm excited to see where we're going.
I can attest to that. I think we met about 3 years ago at MITRE, and you were just kind of going down the journey, getting started. But wow, good stuff. And I look forward to chatting with you more about a few things. Let's go with Robert.
Yeah, so our office is the CTO's office for the Department of Defense. And so most of the laboratories, federally funded research and development centers, and other research institutions within the DoD sort of collaborate and coordinate with us. Being the person who oversees what's going on in software and data analytics, it becomes an interesting problem, as we've talked about in one of the prep sessions, where software is becoming an increasing amount of the cost of most major systems in general. And DevOps is becoming sort of the go-to way to try to address that. But DevOps in its current form is very human intensive. It's still got a lot of people in the loop. And if you're going to really automate the software lifecycle, you've got to start to use automated methods to reduce the sort of overhead of trying to integrate really large systems on demand. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to model the way systems work, how to measure them as they're operating, and then how to update them or manage them on the fly, so that, for instance, if there's a major disruption in your infrastructure, the system can automatically suggest ways to sort of recover and manage its way out of that. So these are, and resilience is a really big deal. It's a really big deal for commercial industry, but it's a really big deal in particular for the Department of Defense. So that's kind of where I spend a lot of time.
Now, I think you bring up a good point about the number of people involved with the development project. I know on the commercial side, they're starting to really use AIOps and reduce the number of people there. So we'll get into that a little bit too, I think. Scott?
Well, I'm not good at finding my unmute button.
Okay.
I swear it moves at every meeting, the unmute. So I have Scott Beliveau from the United States Patent Trademark Office. Just for some background, our mission at the USPTO is to issue quality, timely patents and trademarks. So basically just about everything you see around you probably has a patent, or bringing all those good things to life to it. To that, we're a fee-funded agency. We have our own fee authority, which kind of turns into how we operate. We operate in a lot of ways like a business, more than necessarily, a pure government agency. And that means we generate a lot of data, and we use a lot of that data to really drive our operational, business, organizational decisions within our agency. And part of that journey of data, and I think it was, as Kristen mentioned earlier, that we're building bigger and bigger models and bringing more and more AI capabilities, one of which being our auto class service, and depending more and more on that, those AI capabilities operationally versus, in previous days when we had people doing it. Well, where AI ops starts coming in is as we're getting more and more complex, with our IT and our data journey, you got to manage the health of all these different servers running these giant models that are keeping us afloat. And it's just getting really hard, much, much harder to be able to do that, and costly from a people process technology perspective. So I think what we're starting to look at, I would say we're very new in our AI ops journey, adventure, kind of moving it from the, okay, we've kind of got some more business operational AI systems on board. And now we're starting, as part of our larger data strategy effort, looking at that in kind of different ways we could really kind of redesign work processes to get at, I think, what Robert was talking about a little bit on that, better augmentation of human operator capabilities or relationships, to try to get some of that force multiplier capability aspect out of it.
Great. Thank you for that. And Will, why don't we go to you and the work that you're doing in the VA? Seems like your little organization's growing.
Well, speaking of little organization, one reason AIOps is extremely important, for example, we treat over 9 million patients. We have over 120,000 doctors and nurses, over 1,200 medical facilities, more than 2 million telehealth episodes of care per year. I can go on, but you can see that we have such large numbers. For example, just looking the other day, we have over 65,000 network devices alone. That doesn't, of course, include all the end devices and the such like that. There's really no way that we can get enough people, enough heads on screens to cover all this without something like AIOps. So, and just to also touch base, we run various AI tech sprints throughout the year. So sometimes we'll focus on different areas, and of course, health is one, and there are others, and we look at as many different categories as possible. And frankly, like one of them coming up is an AI brain summit. It's not quite in this particular topic, but I just wanted to bring that one particular up. We're also working on AI workforce knowledge certification. Of course, things like that would include AI ops. We do a number of pilots and things like that as well. One thing I wanted to talk about today was you just don't launch AI ops capability and say, great, it's loaded, because there's model drift over time, and that can come from different domain concepts that can be modified over time. They're added, deleted, especially. And anytime such concept changes occur, that should trigger model retraining. And then data drift occurs when either data models or applications or interfaces are updated, potentially changing how they shall be monitored or controlled. So the learning cycle, the model learning cycle, has to be triggered to retrain, whether on a short schedule, manually, or by automatic recognition by the AIOps tool, that targeted metrics, such as accuracy, et cetera, have gone out of bounds, for example. And attention really must be paid to weighing more recent data, including events, incidents, et cetera, so that the data that drives drift and drives model retraining receives sufficient focus and is not just swallowed up in large multi-year training. So back to you.
Yep, thank you for that. And one little quick follow-up: how big is the National Artificial Intelligence Institute these days? It seems, remember when Dr. Altaveros started that. What does that organization look like within the VA?
Well, the interesting thing is, it's hard to put a specific number on it, because there are people that are hired directly into the NI, we call it NIII, and there are people that are loaned in from other parts of the VA. And we have a good number of presidential management fellows and presidential innovation fellows, and then other people that are loaned from other agencies. And so I don't know if I could give you a specific answer. It's well over 25, and then we've got contracts and things like that. So I'll catch you later just to fill you in more.
No problem. I remember when you all launched that, it's made a lot of progress. Seems like it's helping the VA out quite a bit. Good effort there. Chakib?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Let me first take a minute.
Got to fuel up.
Absolutely. I want to take a minute to get the word out about the great NTIS, like you said, Tom, because it's the best kept secret in the federal government. So NTIS is a bureau within the US Department of Commerce with unique authorities from Congress, enabling us to enter in partnership with the nation's top private sector companies, academic institutions, and nonprofits to address national data-centric challenges. We offer a pathway towards data-driven innovation and digital transformation for federal agencies through an innovative framework grounded in design thinking and agile methodology. So we have been supporting a myriad of projects across the federal government for several departments, bureaus, and agencies, including the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, Department of Labor, Human and Health Services, USAID, and others. So this engagement provides us with a unique perspective on mission-critical data priorities, including how to leverage AIOps to support data-driven decision-making, optimize resources and processes, and achieve mission outcome. So let me focus on our work in the context of AIOps. As we know, AIOps is the practice of applying analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to big data to automate and improve IT operations. We believe at NTIS this is much needed, as the IT operation management and cybersecurity threats have become increasingly challenging with the expansion of federal agencies' digital footprint and the ever-growing volumes of data. We think that AIOps is designed to bring in the speed of and accuracy of AI to IT operations. So let me briefly mention, and we can expand on that later based on our experience with several federal agencies, what we recommend from the strategic point of view to any federal agency to engage in. First, number one, mature their data practices to seize the opportunity to fully leverage data and glean data-induced insight to achieve mission. Two, modernize the IT infrastructure and progress towards an enterprise data platform architecture. Three, federal agencies need to step away from a vertical approach in data storing and management to reinvent themselves into a truly horizontal, open, and modern data-driven enterprise. So let me illustrate the power of AIOps in a specific use case. The advantage of using AIOps and AI in general is because it automatically analyzes massive amounts of networks and machine data to find patterns without human involvement in the beginning, to identify the cause of existing problems and predict and prevent future ones. So in a specific case where we worked on with a federal agency to address cybersecurity and threat intelligence. So this federal agency was very interested in developing AI-enabled cybersecurity operations that include network event detection, user activity monitoring, and network mapping. In other words, we try to help them leverage AIOps to develop a kind of mathematical fingerprint to identify any malicious actor or cyber threat actor in general. And we were able to use AIOps to allow analysts and operators to search for devices and endpoints on a network that are behaving and communicating similarly to a suspicious device or unknown malicious actor. And this has been very successful because we were not only able to actually using network logs for a couple of months, reproduce all the malicious actors that they have identified previously with traditional approaches, but identify a new malicious actor that had a completely different pattern to it. And that's only possible if you use and automate all that operations of data analysis, pattern recognition, and then only eliminate false positive and only surface the elements that you are really interested in approaching. Another example I will talk about also very briefly is fraud detection. Of course, we helped another agency, a system with using AIOps and cutting edge data analytics to surface irregular and unlawful patterns from their quest to detect and prevent fraud, and we can expand on that later on. Thank you.
And good to have you back again, Willie. Love to hear your perspectives. You see everything across all the federal agencies, as well as I know you interface with your commercial colleagues. Just love to hear your comments and what do you see, across all the federal agencies.
Well, first of all, let me just begin by saying I'm always excited when I'm talking about AI, AIOps, but even more so with such a distinguished group of people here. This is fantastic. Listening to all of the stories, Lieutenant Commander Sailing, I mean, just what you're doing is fantastic. I'm sitting here smiling too because I'm listening to Robert and listening to what Shakib just said, and these are the things that I talk about, daily with agencies. And really, what Dynatrace, I've been here about 11 years now, and I can tell you that over that period of time, it's exciting to see how much we have kind of grown to focus on the mission, and what our job is to really help bring forth operational excellence and successful mission outcomes for our agencies. And I get to talk about that, how AI can help bring that to bear. And that comes from everything that's been talked about here. And I hear this from all agencies that, I hate talking about COVID, I hate talking about the pandemic, but with that, we've seen a great rise in, just not only work from home, but embrace of more SaaS platforms, more migrations to the cloud. It's just become a necessity. Things that honestly, I talked to agencies before the pandemic, they were talking about 3-4 years down the road. They instantly had to start figuring out, okay, how are we going to do that? And this has caused an explosion in complexity of networks. Shakib, I think you were just mentioning this, the explosion of data that's coming in telemetry from all of these systems. How do we analyze this data? How do we understand when an anomaly has occurred? Because even though I've been here 11 years, I've been doing this close to 20. I started off as an admin, a system admin. So this was long before we had AIOps, and I would sit behind looking through logs when there was a problem, trying to figure out, usually the customer called me, and then I'm trying to dig through all of these different systems to figure out what the root cause is. Now we have the ability to leverage AI as and I forgive me, I think it might have been Robert who mentioned this, or Scott, as a force multiplier. And I talk about this a lot, a force augmentation, where all of this data can be ingested, it can be analyzed, it can be monitored, anomalies can be quickly found, and then root cause can be executed or can be discovered and executed, some type of remediation. All of that is because of AI. One thing that we are focused on at Dynatrace, and actually it's kind of a passion to me too, is we haven't really talked about it now, but I think Will and I talked about this in a conversation a while back about explainability in our AI models. And that's something that I think is important as well, because one thing I do talk to agencies about is, everybody's thinking about AI, but does everyone trust these models? Does everyone trust the data that's coming out? So, because a lot of times these are black boxes. What's happening inside the model, what's happening inside of those algorithms, it's just an answer is being spit out and we're asked to trust it. Now, when you can put some trust behind it, when you can take off that veil and say, here's a diagram of all the things that I went through to find in a human readable way to come up with my answer, that is something that's really important, I think, for agencies to look at, and something that I've been personally kind of focused on trying to educate as I talk to other leaders.
Great, thank you for that, Willie. Very interesting. So the first question I have is, government is never moved super fast, but it seems like with the pace of technology and COVID, things are moving a lot faster than maybe they were 5 years ago, right? So with the increasing pace of digital transformation, how is this affecting agencies to monitor IT performance and fix problems? It's much more of a moving train, it seems to me. Maybe we'll start off with you, Colonel Sailing.
So not to fall back on trite platitudes, but when they say necessity is the mother of invention, when it's either you have to invent and innovate or your system crashes, it really motivates you to kind of figure out how to solve problems. Because of all the different added loads and because of the necessity of moving this, this enterprise machine we have forward to make decisions and to communicate, and not being able to do it face to face, we really had to innovate on how we were going to have our communications network stand up. That put us in the position of having to figure out some new techniques of monitoring when that communication system was going to go down. And the same thing kind of happened when we started sitting there looking at all the data that we were collecting and ingesting, asking new questions, collaborating in new ways, I think led to a lot of this also, and having to figure out how to boost our analytic capability. We've known for a long time that human machine teaming is not only something that's interesting that we need to study, but it's going to become a necessity. I did a presentation recently where we went through just the sheer amount of information that was being generated through social media, through chatter, through all the different types of ways we communicate as an organization. And when you look at that, and when you look at that amount of just data that has to be ingested into human usable information, there's no way to do it without good analytics, and there's no way to run those analytics without, operationalizing AI into the way that we monitor our analytics and the way we monitor the ingest of the information. So we have looked at this as a tremendous opportunity to boot the whole of the Army in the direction that a lot of the innovators have wanted to go. And it's been a great way for us to communicate the necessity of moving in this direction, given some of the investment that our adversaries are making.
Great, thank you. Scott? We didn't move it on you, did we?
It moved again. I don't know.
We're getting a little back chatter about where did you get that Pac-Man ghost?
Oh, yeah, it was he keeps me on my toes, keeps me out of trouble. Gotcha. It was like from Geek Store or something like that. No, and I think going to the question, have any of us in sort of our federal government or lives found when it looks to analytics or data or any of those strengths, life getting slower or getting faster? And I think within the operational space, as it relates to data and things that we're looking to do of getting, the construct of leaner, meaner, or better, faster, cheaper. A lot of that, ends up, of course, being driven based on data. I think it was Andrew Ning who was mentioned about, AI often is data and models. And the end of the day, and in order to, really take advantage and, force multiply, and to do that more with less, if you look at kind of history as a lesson, it's always been, human machine partnerships in some way, shape, or form. So as a result, going back, it's necessity is the mother of invention in a lot of ways. When you start more and more complicated systems that require, a higher and higher, more and more people with higher and higher skill sets, to manage and operate, you really need to, either have a big issue or big outage and say, though, that's not very good, or, step up and look at ways to be able to take advantage of new technologies to, particularly improve those operations. And, for most of us, I think in the federal government, our mission is not to fail. It's to provide the best services to our customers. And that means that, even despite the pace of organizational IT change, we need to step it up and use, any tool that we have available to us in the toolkit, as it were. And AIOps is one of those important ones.
Thank you for that. And Robert, got a big challenge there over at Department of Defense. I know you guys have been, as the pace of change, change is happening. It's even harder and harder to keep up.
Yeah. So, I mean, to answer your question, I mean, it's interesting that there are really direct parallels between the commercial world and what significant differences, because the DoD has a very deep well of legacy systems, and those systems aren't going away. They're going to need to be maintained and managed for many, many years to come. And so there's this sort of intuition that you can just sort of do a clean slate design and sort of let the legacy stuff sort of be completely rebuilt. And I think what we're finding is that there's kind of a middle ground between sort of new things and maintaining your legacy infrastructure, and that creates some interesting new challenges. And then to some earlier points, I think there was a lot of discussion. I think Willie talked about having guarantees of performance and behavior in your machine learning or your AI. So a lot of the techniques that exist today commercially are driven by sort of advertising or revenue models. And I think one of the things that we found is that there's an evolution now for very safety critical systems. And this is coming in with things like self-driving cars and space travel and a lot of other things. But in those cases, there are models for machine learning that are evolving into interpretable sort of results that humans can understand. For instance, instead of just using a standard convolutional neural network, you might want to use a more statistically driven one so that you can actually calculate risk on the model. There are things like graphical neural networks now, which enable you to essentially have a sort of underlying framework to learn on, as opposed to sort of building one every time you get a new set of data. And with that, you can now start to do verification and validation and model checking if you're a software person on the system, so that you can guarantee the performance of what you're going to do, generically speaking. And that's really important, because whether you're dealing with legacy infrastructure or whether you're dealing with a complete clean slate design or something in between, having a guarantee of system performance over that sort of heterogeneous set of system elements is really critical.
Great, thank you for that. Next, we'll go to the VA and Will.
Yes, and I'd like to echo what Robert just said. The VA has, 7 very large portfolios, and within those portfolios, a large number of product lines, and then large number of products, and so on and so forth. And there's been points in time, and there's still points in time when how those portfolios are run were very different and had different tools and so on and so forth. And so, how do you start bringing all these heterogeneous tools together? And that, along with the very large number of enterprise network components I talked about, 65,000, we also had over 27,000 application components to monitor as well. And again, you're not going to get enough people staring at the screens and be able to coordinate them to be able to do this without something like AIOps. So that's why it has been a factor at the VA, and that's why we just can't do it without it. Now, to also talk about explainability, yes, we do need that, because occasionally if something happens and you need to drastically change the network capacity at a hospital, who's in the middle of doing a certain kind of surgery or this or that. So there are many different kinds of safety. And so I heard somebody earlier, because I've also worked at NASA, and yes, space operations, of course, that's a major one as well. So everything I've been hearing here falls right in line with what we need at the VA and the kinds of things we've been having to react to.
Great. Keith?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Tom, the silver lining of the pandemics is that they has basically created the necessity that Kirsten and Scott mentioned for digital transformation for all federal agencies and for all organizations. So as Willie mentioned, the IT enterprise is increasingly complex. So we have data sources, applications, services, and we want to have a better understanding of all the service provided. So, and the data and tools supporting them, as well as how they are interconnected and how they relate to each other. And like Kirsten said, so in time of crisis, or since all these application services are actually supporting very critical operation and general operation, etc., that we need to, if the system goes down, we want to figure out what's the root cause as soon as possible and restore it. And even in the future, try to mitigate it or even prevent it in advance. So how do we do that? So we need basically to use some intelligent automation for monitoring, for advanced monitoring approach. So we can keep up with not only the current operation that we have and the data that we already possess, but the increasing volumes of incoming data and the complexity of the operation that we have to use the data to support. Just to give an example of things that can be very important, I think AIOps, and I think really mentioned that, and then I would like to stress that point very much for federal agencies, is that, you know, he mentioned the notion of trust, because whenever you have intelligent automation, when it's and using AI and ML to support like processes, you need to make sure that when you're actually asking AI or machine learning to make a decision for you, you want to trust that decision. So a recent study of Oxford University have actually gone through about 250 ML applications, and they found out that 80% of the issues that they got out of those models comes actually from data. So what we want to stress with all federal agencies that we work with is first develop a data-centric approach to AI and ML and AIOps. It's extremely important to move away from vertical silos into horizontal silos, and make sure to spend to engage in cleaning and modernizing your data ingestion, your data cleaning and preparation, your transformation of the data, and then make it shareable so you can benefit from the data to better support your operation, to optimize your processes, and to basically reduce the amount of time that your limited personnel have to actually address root cause and critical problems that can occur.
Thank you for that. Willie?
So honestly, there's been so much great conversation here. The only thing I think I would add, and Shakib, just kind of following up on what you just said, I think that along with the collection of this data, the kind of the hygiene of the data, making sure it's good, clean data, and also I always like to focus on as much as we can automate as possible, because also this could become tedious, like the gathering of this telemetry, the gathering of this data. So any ways that you can automate the process of that gathering of data from multiple sources. It could be telemetry from a server, application code, you know, security events, logging. Again, going back to, I don't ever like to talk about how old I am, but, you know, going back to, you know, 20 years ago, I I only had to worry about 2 or 3, maybe a couple of servers here, maybe a database server. I knew exactly where the logs were. I knew exactly where the application code was. I knew all these things. So troubleshooting it was easy. Now, when we move into a world where some of my data might be on-premise, some of it might be in the cloud, some of it might be spun up in a container. I don't know where the logs are. I don't know where the application developer are writing the logs. All of these things make it difficult to find this data, but also to maintain it, because if things move, how do you know it's moved? How do you then start collecting that data? Because then that starts impacting your models. And the important thing with that too is all of these data points are extremely important in accurate root cause analysis. And the funny thing is that I've seen, this is more on the commercial side. I haven't really seen this yet on the federal side, but I'm sure I'm going to see it here soon, where we had a commercial customer where I saw a problem that had, and this is not an exaggeration, probably close to 30 billion dependencies within the one application model. And these were, all of these were coming down to code, coming down to network communication and so forth. I can't remember who said it, but there's no way humanly possible to actually see all of that, to actually analyze it and find root cause. So having good, clean data, to have automated ingestion of that data, and then trust in the model, because then you have to actually trust that it understood all of those 30 billion connections and isolated it down to all of that. This is the one thing you need to focus on. So that is, those are the kind of things that I'm seeing, at least from an agency standpoint.
Willie, yeah, for my next question, I kind of want to pull the thread on that. I'm an old telecom person, and I would install communication circuits for the carriers like FTS 2000, not to try to date myself, 2001, and DISA circuits and all that, NMCI. Sometimes the plug got pulled out, and you can figure out, oh, they unplugged the T1. You figure it out. Right now, it's like, how does agencies? The challenges are you're managing hybrid systems distributed across federal data centers, multiple government clouds, and multiple commercial clouds. I just want to ask the panel, what kind of challenges are there for performance and troubleshooting? Willie kind of started that conversation. Maybe go with you, Colonel Stanley.
I think the biggest challenge we face, no matter what we're trying to implement in terms of automated solutions, is it all depends on the quality of the fuel we're putting into it and the quality of the data. One of the things that we're really trying to inculcate into the Army is that whatever we collect, whatever we curate, whatever we're going to feed into these machines, it has to be quality, because otherwise we're just going to make bad decisions faster. So a lot of that's just cultural change, thinking about not just collections. One of the ways we've been kind of harming ourselves in the past on this is we think of doing collections in a system base. We're so used to thinking in terms of the Privacy Act, what's our system of record, without really thinking about end-to-end management of these data objects as they move through these, we're starting to have a more federated data space, either through APIs or we're broadening into a larger data fabric. But as these things move from initial point of entry through multiple points of ingest into other systems, different types of curation, we're aggregating data in different ways. We really have to think about the end-to-end use of this information as we're doing data quality. So that is a hugely challenging prospect, but at least we're kind of getting to the point where we're starting to look at our data and curate our data appropriately. After that, it's just a question of getting the processes right, which is another big problem, but at least we've got that foundation.
Great. Scott?
I'm also a telecom guy. So I was an old former telecom guy. I was gonna joke about it used to be the Birmingham, Alabama data center, and if there was trouble, I go and I knock on the door to the guys in the Unix room, and I'd come with a box of donuts or something, and that was how you ended up troubleshooting the information, to maintain or get access to the logs or something along those lines. And I think what you're seeing.
Though. I'm a little worried about that scaling. You can only do that so much.
Well, and that's exactly where, I can only give out so many donuts and knock on so many rooms. And I think that's where you're starting to see, with the, expansion of, multiple networks and managing it, where you get to more and more of this concept of needing explainability and needing to be able to trust decision making. And I think, touching on kind of on those areas, as we're, we certainly want our operators within the room to have all the information available to them, to then really be able to, to some extent, with that information, make the decision to go left or right or up or down or to reboot a server. But then instead of going through all of those commands processes to do that, enable the kind of the machine to sort of take over from that particular decision making process, because we certainly can't bring, everybody can't bring donuts to the Unix server room. We get very expensive
Right.
all over the world traveling around.
Right. Robert?
I will say that there's always a greater need for donuts, so I'll go with that, definitely. But in general, yeah, here's the thing. If you want to think about, telecom system, heterogeneous distributed infrastructure, and you're going to now use modern software practices to manage and maintain all of that with some automated, back-end process. Thinking out the steps to that is, again, it's a very current topic in a research sense. And one of the there's a whole world of things called model-based systems engineering, model-based software engineering, and the interesting thing about that is that that's largely based on graph representation of systems. And then if you go to management of the infrastructure, you're always trying to measure it. You're always, and there's usually a bunch of information services out there you're trying to pull data from and interpret what's going on. And so there's this sort of back and forth, and sometimes people call this a digital twin, although that's more in the cyber physical system realm, where you're matching the performance of the actual infrastructure to what you hope it's supposed to do from a modeling perspective. And then there's the, well, what do I do about it? And that's the sort of software generation piece. And that's the DevOps sort of, current piece that's out there. So if you're going to automate that process and you're going to trust it, you sort of have to converge those things and make sure the models that you're building are based on real, sort of interpretable, structural, and checkable paradigms, so that you do trust what your system is sort of evolving into, and that's incredibly important from a resiliency standpoint as well as just a design standpoint. So that's a whole field, and yeah, it's an emerging field that's really critical to really make progress in this area.
Thank you, Robert. Will? You're on mute.
Yeah, there's a topic you brought up a little bit earlier about heterogeneity, and it's right. It's not just that we have a variety of different APMs and other related tools, but some systems, and of course, some value stream capabilities can have dependencies like data sources and function calls and service calls and things like that cross agency cloud assets, managed services, virtual machines, and even on-premise physical servers. And there may be an application that may hit all of those just to do one particular capability, or large capability. So that is an extremely difficult. How do we run down the full transaction, end to end with something like that? So with AIOps, allows lots of things such as discovery is very important as well. So I just wanted to emphasize that one particular point, because just the ability to make the connections, and with all the various interfaces and things like that most offerings have now, that provides a lot of power to be able to not only recognize something on a screen, but able to set something up without having to take an inordinate amount of time to go through the entire discovery process.
Great, thank you. Shakib?
Yeah, I think I want to again emphasize the point about that we need to move away from time-consuming manual processes and towards modern technology that is dynamic and enables movement at machine speed. So how do we do that? Automation is the name of the game. So we want to develop intelligent automation. And then, as I mentioned before, that requires a focus on clean, structured data that reflects the complete business services of an organization, from application to infrastructure. And as like I mentioned, Tom, running across multi-cloud or hybrid cloud architecture, et cetera. So clean data, accurate and contextually rich real-time data is needed to provide relationship between the application and the underlying infrastructure. I don't want to provide information about my age, like Willie mentioned, but my dad told me that about 10, 15 years ago, IT operation monitoring was basically just looking at CPU utilization, memory, and IO operation. And we used to define thresholds. And then when you get out of bandwidth within those thresholds, you just send an alert. So they were mostly reactive systems that we work on. And like we mentioned, now we have APM tools that we in our tool set that provide more advanced diagnostic tools that they provide us a deeper dive into looking at the network, looking at the system, etc. But we still using a reactive approach. So AIOps allow us to move really, really further in that and become more efficient by providing us a way to actually predict and mitigate issues that we can have with our IT operations in advance. And how do we do this? Again, we need to get a good grasp of our infrastructure, our data collection, and the data life cycle in general, to be able to get us a good end-to-end visibility of the whole enterprise. And that's going to be key for efficient implementation of AIOps.
Great. Well, Willie, you started this. You want to close this question?
Yes, great. And actually, before I do that, I was going to say, Scott, you were mentioning Birmingham. That was my old stomping ground. I graduated my master's at UAB and went to undergrad at Sanford. So yeah, that spent a lot of time in Birmingham. But so again, just following on to everything that everyone has said already, and you know, I honestly couldn't say it any better, but you know, one of the big challenges that I see across agencies is that, you know, there is more of an embrace of AI. It's basically everybody's talking about it, everyone's thinking about it, everyone's thinking about AIOps. But when it comes to our most mission critical systems, when it comes to the most important systems in the federal government, I still see a lot of legacy thought that is going into kind of monitoring these systems, even as we migrate to the cloud, even as we try to make them more cloud native or move to microservices and containers and all that. You know, people are, you know, agencies I speak with, they're thinking about, well, you know, I was using this tool X, you know, with my old system, I was just collecting some metrics up, down, whatever, you know, no automation, no AI behind it. It was fine. It should work fine in these environments, not understanding how complex these systems are getting, how this is going to balloon, and also how, you know, this isn't in a vacuum. I mean, these systems will continue to grow. They will continue to become more complex. So, you know, my education starts around trying to explain why these older generation of tools in the past were great, but you know, we really need to move towards AI. And I think Robert or Shakiba, I think both of you mentioned this, but I'm also a real big advocate of shifting what we call like shifting left this thought process, because it's great to have this in production and your production systems. It's great to have this analysis, but I'm old school in thinking that we should fix our problems before they become a production problem. And so, you know, you could leverage this same technology. You can leverage AI in your development process. As you're, you know, even in our own development labs, we have this what we call continuous testing process, where our AI can learn from our testing system because we never shut it down. We're literally always testing code, even when we're not doing integration test or build. So the models are continually running. It always knows what good is. And then when we inject a new build, it can start to see, okay, things are really starting to diverge from the norm, that I'm starting to see an anomaly that I shouldn't see in that build. So we can automatically detect it and fix it, which I always think is funny. In our labs, we have this, we used to have this problem where someone would submit code, hit submit, and run out the door right before the end of the day, because if it broke, they would have to fix it. And what would happen is an integration build would fail, it would stop the build for the rest of the day until someone fixed it the next day. Now, when we shift it left, the test, you actually can't leave until that auto test completes, until the AI actually comes back and says, not only everything is good, but were there any regressions, where we give you that full analysis. So that I'm a big proponent of moving that that analysis into the into your whole pipeline, if that makes sense.
Great. Well, this panel's going by really quickly. So we're going to hit the polls real quick. Like I said, I only get trouble with the CPE people. That's like, that's fate worse than death. And then we'll have some closing comments. All right, we got quick triggers out there with our audience. Does your agency leverage AIOps? So we're starting kind of at the basics here. There we go. Can we see the results? All right, Alyssa. Maybe they're still coming in. There we go. So this is relatively new. I'm actually surprised at the percentage that said yes. It's kind of coming along. All right. Next question. If your agency uses AIOps to identify root cause, is that root issue remediated automatically or by human intervention? Good question. And somehow Zoom made it so we can't participate. I don't know what happened on that. I don't know. There's probably some scientific reason or something. I don't know though. We're going to figure that one out the next time. Go ahead and show the results.
I think it's because we don't skew the results.
Yep. Maybe. Yeah. Great. A little bit of a mix there. I definitely think for this panel, I haven't seen too many AIOps panels. I think this is fairly early in the game here, but that's good. That's why we're the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. We want to talk about these things before they get too mainstream. And the last one, in your opinion, what is the biggest challenge in the day-to-day life of an IT manager in your organization? Oh my gosh. This is going to be interesting. Is there an all the above somewhere?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
I was going to say, let's just click those.
Yep. All right. Let's see what we have. Back with some results here. I predict all over the place. This will be a carpet bomb. Let's see. Okay. We're all over the place a little bit there. Great. Okay. Each of the panelists, let's give about 30 seconds. Where are we going to be next? Where do you think we'll be in your organization by next year? At this time. Well, start off with you, Colonel Sailing.
So
where do you hope to be?
There's a lot of potential here. I mean, we have a whole campaign of learning that we're doing in the data and AI space, where we're federating data talent and data capability out into echelons below enterprise. We're looking at everything from regular data analytics to edge computing. And all of these things are predicated on having that good database layer, on having the good automation that we need in order to detect whether or not our data pipes are working the way they should. The potential is huge. Now it's just a question of seeing whether or not we can pull it off and overcome that whole list of obstacles that was just put up there for the IT space.
Great, thank you. Scott?
And say fewer IT operations by donuts and running more of them through AIOps is really, though donuts are tasty, they're not a great way to run the IT operations of a federal agency. But I within our agency, I'm assuming we're gonna start small and look for some of the I think some of the lower RPA particular use cases to be able to start really building that, that level of trust within the operational areas, so that as we scale and as we move more and more to the cloud, we're not FedExing donuts to data centers all over the place to try to keep the lights running and moving.
Funny, Scott. Robert?
So in the sort of quest to build the plane while you're flying it, I think we're going to keep trying to automate more and more, and that's inevitable. But what I'd like to see is there to be real textbooks and sort of rigorous disciplines, within engineering and computer science and a lot of the supporting disciplines to actually really back this up as a field of research and study, because I think it's critically needed in so many different ways. So hopefully that's the sort of commercial interest and government interest will inspire that.
I think that's a great point. Too often the universities and all training lags. It's talking about Telcom instead of AIOps or something, Great. Will?
Sure. We're also going to continue to build trust, and there's we're focused more on augmented intelligence instead of just artificial intelligence, and then increasingly the percentage of our applications that are becoming SaaS is just going up and up and up. So we're including a lot of that in our acquisition of SaaS in terms of what is it you can provide in terms of your own AIOps and the like that.
Yeah, I believe that due to the fact that of several acts from the government that encourage federal agencies to modernize the infrastructure and focus on cybersecurity with the net zero infrastructure recommendation, and that includes some fund, the TM fund, Technology Modernization Fund. I see a lot of activities in federal agencies to start working on modernizing their infrastructure and ensuring that they are moving towards a data enterprise platform. And the focus on cybersecurity, I think, is going to be it's going to grow and evolve very rapidly, and AIOps will be part of the solution. I mean, there is so many. When the enterprise attack surface now is massive and continue to grow and evolve, there is billion of signals that you have to worry about, and it's beyond any human scale. So it has to become machine scale and AI scale, and I see that definitely there is a trend towards that to identify different types of threats, including malicious actors.
Great. Willie, you want to put a bow tie on this discussion? No
Yes,
pressure or anything.
not a problem. So first of all, I just want to say again, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with all of you. And I think in the upcoming year, the things that I'm focused on, I think I speak also, I think from a company standpoint, my goal is to reach, every agency. Now that I can travel a little bit more, get out and see people a little bit more, I want to have more and more face-to-face conversations about these topics to learn what the agency, what the government's needs are, and how we can help fulfill those and partner with agencies. But also, to Shakib's point, there's going to be a large focus from a security standpoint, because all of the data that we're collecting, all of this telemetry, I've been a big proponent, even before AIOps was a big thing, that this type of observability and security, DevSecOps go hand in hand. And we're going to see more and more of that. And more on a note that's outside of kind of AIOps, but a personal kind of goal for myself. And I know for a lot of the people I work with is also education. I think is a real big part, especially for me getting to a younger set of engineers out there, actually, especially a more diverse group, because one thing that I concern myself with from an AI perspective is diversity in our data scientists, making sure that we're, we have to always be concerned about inherent things that might be built into models that we don't even plan on. So I really am focused on making sure we get more education to actually build the next workforce for the government to come in to kind of help build these models for you and build these systems.
Great. Well, thank you, Willie. And thank you, Robert, Shakib, Scott, Will, and Kristen today. This has been a great discussion. I think it's going to be the first of many. And we have up next, there's always another program going on here. Up next, furthering cybersecurity with state and local government using digital modernization. And that'll be next week. And of course, would you like us to send, this is the kind of service you get at ATARP now. If you'd like to get your CPE credits, you just fill that final poll and we'll just take care of you and send you your certificate. Everybody else have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.